Welcome to the Real People, Real Business Show. My name is Stephanie Hayes, and I'm a business strategist who helps experienced business owners design asset-based business models that set them up for growth and exit. I love to speak with like-minded entrepreneurs to share their real stories and the gritty details on how they've navigated their own way through. On this show, you won't hear about the glamorized entrepreneurship journeys that you see online, and you won't be told how to make six figures in 6 weeks. Instead, you can expect to hear real, vulnerable, and inspiring stories you can relate to that have helped create the foundation for each of our guests' businesses. Today, I am so excited to welcome Moira de Ghallachoir. Moira shows coaches, business leaders, and service-based entrepreneurs how to build a top-tier income from speaking and become a sought-after authority worldwide. She went from being a youth worker living in London, making $30K a year, to a business mentor and speaker, building multiple six figures in revenue just 2 years after she discovered the power of speaking, and now shows her clients how to do the same in half the time. She has captivated audiences worldwide with her powerful presentations, her retreats in Paris, New York, Valencia, Dublin, and soon Morocco, which I would really like to go to, sharing the outstanding success stories from her clients who have created financial independence for themselves. Welcome to the show, Moira, and thanks so much for being here and taking the time to share your story today.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. It's brilliant to be here with you.
So tell me the story. Youth worker in London, how did you make the transition into speaking and building the business that you have today? Tell us everything.
Yeah, transition, it makes it sound like a nice word that maybe it all flowed, but it certainly was not the case. Not at all. But yeah, I think like many women, when they get close to 40, they start questioning their lives and what they do and who they are and how they're spending their time and their money and all that. And I was no different. I was approaching my 36th birthday, and I just all of a sudden was overwhelmed with, is this it? Is this as good as it gets, Moira? And I remember like going through a whole time where I was just like really down and a little bit depressed with my life, where I'm like usually all like, let's go, let's party, let's have fun. I was super energetic. So it was strange for me to feel like that. I really felt it. And, I felt like I was looking for a sign from the universe, Stephanie, as we do. And just out of nowhere, a friend of mine who had owed me money from, a long time ago, he arrived back in London. He was like, oh, hey, Moira, thank you so much for lending me that money. And I was like, thank you so much. And like, the woman I was then, or the girl, I would have said, let's go, let's party, let's have a great weekend. And I just thought, no, maybe this is the sign. So I did what every girl would do in my situation. I bought myself a ticket on the Eurostar to Paris. And I went there to go like, I'm going to make some decisions about my life. And in Paris, I had a moment of, London is just not for me anymore. And while I was sitting in this beautiful cafe in Montmartre, thinking about where else in the world I could go, because I was living in London at the time, I had a phone call from home. And there was something about the way the words home came up on the screen that day that I had this sense of peace wash over me. And I was just like, oh my God, I want to go home. So I left Ireland when I was 18 years old. And this was me at 36 with the world at my fingertips. And I wanted to move back to this little village in the middle of nowhere and start again. What? And yeah, it was the best decision I ever made, because that sparked the entrepreneurial fire in me, because I literally had to come up with something to do, because finding a job here wasn't really an option. And my first business was a travel business because I wanted to promote my local area. And then from that, I learned that businesses really needed help with sales. So I focused on sales in the beginning, and then speaking became part of the journey just a little bit down the line. But that's really how it happened. And, looking back, I'm so glad I did that, because my mom didn't have long to live when I made that decision. And I would never have known. Nobody would have known, but she only had 5 years to live. And I was just so glad that I moved back home and got to spend those 5 years with her living back here.
Yeah. And I'm not a religious person, but I honestly believe there is some sort of energy out in the universe that guides us in some direction with our intuition. And who knows where that came from. And so you started a travel business. And what happened with that business? So did it continue to grow? Did you evolve past it?
Yeah, that was really a passion project, because when I moved back home, I could really see that businesses were struggling and the main industry was tourism. And I was just like, that's crazy. This place is amazing. So I just really took it upon myself to create adventures, like heart-led like kind of hidden gem adventures where I got all the local services together and we would put on these amazing adventures together. But it was from working with those individual businesses that I started to really learn about the problems that businesses were actually facing, which was really getting sales and clients. And I had spent like maybe, I'd say probably 6 years of my life working in marketing before I got into youth work, because youth work was another, like I felt like this was like my calling to do that work for a while. So I was able to draw on those skills I had before and start helping these people individually. And then that's how my coaching business started. And I don't think that my business continued, but the partnerships, the JV ventures that were created among all those businesses, that stayed strong and that continued to blossom.
So when did you make the transition into what you're doing now, into coaching, and sort of how did that work?
Yeah, so it was messy. Let's say I didn't do like a launch of a coaching business. I just started more or less phasing something out and then just pulling in something new, which I think is really important for people to think when they're thinking about a business. Like I think they can go into this like frame of mind, oh, I need to launch and I need to do this big thing. But actually you don't. You just want to just start bringing something new in, just adding another layer to what you're doing. And then eventually the other project will just phase out. And that's a much better way to do it, because then you can make the mistakes when the stakes are low then, and you're not like, like, oh, I'm launching my new business and then nobody knows about it, and give yourself a bit of time to actually build some relationships and build some clients. And that's when speaking became a thing for me, because I realized after I had worked with those local businesses, there wasn't that many, and I wasn't living in a very highly populated area. I had to travel sometimes like 4 or 5 hours to go to a networking event. And I was really thinking I need to find a faster way to get in front of business owners, because I knew I had a really great message for them. So I literally stumbled upon an event locally, which is unheard of here. And there was a sign saying entrepreneurs, authors, leaders, all this. And I was like, I need to be one of those speakers. And, I had the voice like we all have, like, well, who do you think you are? What are you going to talk about? You don't speak on stages. But I just swallowed my pride, walked into the office and asked the organizers if they would consider me as a speaker, and gave them a little bit of a spiel about what I had been doing. And they said, yeah, we've actually seen you on social media. And I had some PR from the travel business in some national newspapers. So people had known of me. And yeah, I got to speak. And in 30 minutes on the stage at that event, I was able to do more in terms of client enrollment in 30 minutes that had taken me 3 months before. So I was like, I found a way that I can grow my business fast today.
Right. And if you can get on stage and you're comfortable and in the stars align for you, it can be extremely effective. But I want to go back to something that you said, and I think it's really relevant to this show, to the way that we work with clients, to, my own personal values and beliefs. And that is that you don't need to do some big fancy launch in order to check the checkbox that says I've launched my business. This is often and normally a slow, progressive, growth over time. And I like the idea of changing one small thing at a time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And slowly evolving. People seem to have this idea that everything needs to be rush, and a big bang, and it often there's so much risk associated with that. And there's also so much disappointment because it takes so much to get that right. And so I think it's entirely permissible and advisable to take the route that you did.
Yeah. And it's like often like people who often do that, they don't have the assets for a launch. They're just thinking about, the front end, I've got my business, I'm going to do this. And you're like, yeah, but what are the assets you're going to use to actually do this? And it seems to be like the last thing people think. That's why I would really encourage people to consider speaking, because speaking actually built me an audience very, very fast of people who heard my story, who got to experience my energy. And then when they were on my list, I built a very highly engaged list because people actually knew me before they joined my list, or they felt they did, because that's what speaking does. You can feel like a speaker after like 30 minutes of listening to them speak.
Yep, you create a shared experience together, and also, it's a wonderful. This is what I like about podcasting too, is it's a wonderful way to become known and to know others, because you get to hear and you get to experience so much more
Mm.
than just looking at pictures or the written word or what have you. So, how do you recommend someone goes about building their speaker profile, and finding those first engagements where it's like I know speaking tends to be one of these things where it's like a little chicken and egg. I will start to get more speaking engagements when I have more speaking engagements to reference. I'm sure you have this question all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And like if there's anybody listening here and they have never spoken before, please don't think that I jumped on stage and I was just like fearless. I was shaking. I went through my whole like thing of being afraid to speak. But when I mentioned earlier, you want to make the mistakes when the stakes are low. So find an event that's local to you that might have 10 to 15 people and offer your services there, because you're more likely to get booked there because the person knows you, likes you, trusts you, and probably wants to support you in what your endeavor is. So a female business networking group, a local business event, like something like that, where
Chamber
you're
of
going to
Commerce.
a chamber of commerce,
Yeah.
exactly. Just
Yeah.
offer to do a 20, 30-minute presentation there. And if you do a good job, if you provide value and people like what they hear, not only will you get clients, but somebody else in that room will probably be able to suggest the next place you speak for you, the next place you can speak. Because stages lead to stages. And I think that if you sit down and think, oh, I need to book 12 stages this year or something like it can be daunting, but get 2 or 3 and be smart enough to use those 2 or 3 to get 5 or 6 out of that.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
I've heard
and
that
what happens with that, Stephanie, is you just get better. You get better and better every time you do. And then when the big opportunity comes, which everybody wants the big opportunity, you're ready for it. You've made all
right.
your mistakes. You've ticked all your boxes. You've gone through all the feels, and then you're ready for a big stage.
And it's okay to start small.
Totally.
Yeah.
Small
I
stages are
think,
gold mines. People
yeah,
don't realize.
I think a lot of people think that they have to be on the big stages, that's all that matters. I remember a lady talking to me who she's built a business around speaking as well. And she said, you know what I did? I just decided that I was going to speak on 100 stages. To speak on
Mm,
100 stages, I started with local and it didn't matter what they were. And she goes, at some point in time, I reached this critical mass where it stopped being me asking to speak and it started me being asked to speak.
exactly. It all
It's-
compounded. That was a
It was
great,
a
I did
tipping
something
point.
similar where I said I was going to speak in every county in Ireland. So Ireland's got 32 counties. So I was like, that's 32 stages. I usually get another stage booked. So that could be 60. So I was like, I'm just going to do that. Plus I got to see my country, which was just a brilliant way to get to travel around the place.
How long does it take to get from one county to another?
Well, that depends. Like the county that I'm in right now, it could take me 2 hours to get to somebody else who's like, on the other side of the county, but it's fairly small. I think you go from the top of Ireland to the bottom in about 7 hours, depending
Oh,
on the
okay.
motorway or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're
Yeah.
we're nothing compared to the States. Come on.
Or Canada. I'm in Canada and I was thinking, gosh, I could speak in every province. I'm like, ooh, getting from one province to another on the other side
Right.
of the country is a good, 7-hour flight. So
Totally. And I actually started to plan a tour of Canada. And actually, that's the year that my mother passed away. So it never came to pass. But I was going to do that. And then I was like looking at going, oh my God, this country is ginormous. What am I thinking?
it is. And there's a lot of space. Like, you
Mhm.
go to the States and it's like town, 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 city. Whereas in Canada, you'll go town, travel, 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 town, travel, 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 travel. Like there's a lot of space in between our sort of our urban areas. So
Right.
you kind of do need to plan it out, I guess. But we're a different country for sure. So for people who are interested in speaking and making speaking part of their visibility strategy, I know it's not for everyone, but can it be? There are people who will say, "Oh, I'm introverted," or "I don't like to be on stage." How do you get past that?
Yeah, I think if you're thinking about it, it's for you. So regardless of whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, because I think for introverts, and one of the coaches in my program, we were talking about this with our clients today. Like introverts think that they need to be like this highly energetic and all like Tony Robbins style person, and actually you don't. But you do need to have a good talk. And you need one good presentation. So just think about it as one performance. And if that performance hits on the pain points of your audience, you relate to them, they like your story, they like you, you're going to get clients, regardless of whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. I don't think it matters. I think everybody's got their own style, and I think everybody's style will be appreciated. And remember, I'm a firm believer, like when I go to speak in a room, there's people in that room that are assigned to me. Like I am going to be the person who's going to help them take them to their breakthrough. I know that. It might not be the entire room, but I'm never speaking to everybody. I'm only ever speaking to the people who have the problems that I solve. So that's not going to be everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's important too, right? Because I think when we try to create talks, we're trying to make everyone happy, but it's absolutely true that you're speaking to a handful, aren't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if you're solving a problem that's common in your market, like you can be sure that the people, like if it's in sales or if it's in business and making money or wealth or like something like that, there's going to be people in that audience that have the problem. But the people that don't, maybe they don't have the problem yet, but they might remember you because they heard you speak. Maybe one of their neighbors, sisters, brothers has a business and they're like, oh my gosh, I need to introduce Moira to my neighbor. This is what they need. Or they're just going to enjoy it because they're there for something else. They'll get something practical. They might pick up a tip or something along the way. But I think you're making a mistake if you're going into a room to please everyone. I think you want to go into that room and provide value to the best of your ability and be as engaging as you possibly can, but not to be there to please everybody, but understand that everybody will get something out of your talk. But you're there to do a job. You're there to provide breakthroughs and transformation for the people that you help. So you should go with that intention.
So what makes a good topic?
Well, I think that topics are really good in around the 4 key areas of people's lives. So it's going to be like money, sales, business. Then it's going to be like love, sex, relationships, fulfillment, purpose, direction, and then I guess spirituality, mindset. Those are really the areas that people invest in, and those are the areas that people have big problems in. So if that's the case, and it's very important to remember that the more specific your talk title can be within those areas, the more likely to get booked that you are. So I would say that would make a good anything in those categories. And then if you're an entrepreneur, well, your talk is basically what's your message? What is the how to solve problem without X? What is that thing that you talk about? That's really what you talk about. And I train people how to have one presentation, Stephanie, so that they get really good at that one presentation. And then they just change the audience. They don't change their talks. They don't change their stories. They just get really good at it. And if you look at all the best speakers and the famous people that we think of, like say Tony Robbins has been doing the same content in UPW for the last 40 years. That's the same, he's doing the same thing. Mel Robbins talks about the same thing. Les Brown talks about the same things. They have one presentation. They probably have a few more, but they have a key presentation that their content.
And one of the things I've learned in trying to create speaker worthy content is that the emotional connection is so critical. And I remember going up there and thinking, I'm just going to teach everybody how to, build a business model.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure everybody would be lining up for that. But if I could, and I've got good things to say about it, but it's not an emotional topic. It doesn't appeal to I love what you just listed off and I want to pin that somewhere, because if it doesn't appeal to one of those, so how can I turn business models into something that appeals to us on an emotional level?
Yeah. So what would you say a business model does for people?
Well, it helps them feel connected to their business, and them being connected to their business means that they can create a life for themselves that helps them support their families and be present for their families, and finally, find that connection to their families that they couldn't when they had a job. And, if we work backwards from that to the why, the business model is what keeps you in that sustained, lifestyle that you really want. Whereas if you don't have the right business model and you've created a business model that's in conflict with who you are as an individual, then that's a business that's likely to fizzle, right?
So I would base it around how to build a business without whatever emotion they have, without the frustration that will last, that will create wealth for a lifetime. So I would kind of like play around with something like that. And I wouldn't get too much into the business model because they don't care. But when you talk about business, then you say, and the way that you do that is you need to create a model, and then you talk about it within that. But I don't think I would go down that route with the talk, because it might be like, oh, what's that? With the talk title, it'd be like, what's that? But how to build a business without frustration that lasts a lifetime and creates wealth and legacy for my family. I want to know about that.
Well, I'll tell you what it ended up as.
What?
It ended up as a talk that was called Reluctantly Feminine.
Okay.
And it just, it was part of a process. And I imagine that you have a process similar that you're taking your clients through. So tell me a little bit more about how you work with your clients.
Yeah, I think the first thing that every entrepreneur needs to get clarity on is like, who are your people? What are their problems? And what is the big outcome that only you can offer them? So we start off with identifying the big problem. And then what's the big payoff that they get if they solve that big problem? And what's the path and process, the unique path and process that they can only get through you? And then from there, we turn that into a signature presentation with a built-in offer, so that every time you speak, you gather leads, and those leads will turn into high ticket sales on the back end. And if you've got a 20K offer, or let's just say a 10K offer, and you get 2 clients every time you speak, well, that means you're getting 20,000 in revenue every time you speak. If you do that once a month for 6 months, you're on your path to a 6-figure business. Or do it twice a month, you're on the path to a multiple 6-figure business.
And that's, provided that you're finding an audience.
Yeah, well, finding the audience is key, like I was saying before. But I think if you can find your first 2 or 3 and you have a good message and a good talk title, and you're actually able to deliver value, you'll get invited to speak. That stage that I told you, that I shared earlier, where I was able to do more in 30 minutes. One of the things that happened at that stage was I was approached by a national event host, and she was there just networking, whatever. And she was like, I loved your story. Would you come and speak at our event in the summer? And I was just like, well, how many people will be there? And she was like, oh, it'll be 200 people. And there was me in a room with like 30 people. And I was just like, wow. So I had almost 6 months to prepare for that event, which I think is another thing that stops entrepreneurs like saying yes and or asking for stages, because they're like, I'm not ready yet. Always remember, if you get booked, you're going to have a specific time frame to get ready. And if you know you're going on that stage, you will be practicing and you'll be preparing for sure. But if there is no stage to get ready for, you're getting ready to be ready for something and you know nothing about it. So it won't happen.
Yes. Yes. And so when you're working with your clients, are you working with them, in sort of a container, or is it, a longer term engagement? If I came to you and I said, okay, Moira, let's do this.
Yeah.
Where do we start?
Yeah, it would really depend on what it is that you need specifically and how fast you want to get it done. Yeah. So there's different levels of working with me. I don't do so much one-to-one, Stephanie, these days. I do more group, but I do work with some VIP clients from time to time, especially if somebody came to me last week and they're like, I have a talk in April. I've paid for it. I really need to make a return. So I was like, yeah, totally. I can do that, because my group program would take longer to get results in there.
Right. Did you start out one-on-one and move into more of a group model?
Yep, absolutely. I think that's the best place to start, because that's where I really learned about my ideal clients. I did one-on-one for, I'd say, for a good 2 to 3 years. I really loved working with the women I was working with. And it just became unsustainable because I didn't have time to do other things, because all my time was booked with clients. So I was kind of forced into a group program. It wasn't what I really wanted to do. But if you want to scale, you really do need a group program. So yeah, I did my one-to-ones for I did my time, let's say, but I learned an awful lot about my clients. So then creating a group program that would really help them at the same type of level of working with me one-to-one was easier, because I really understood them.
So, how do you recommend that one of your clients starts to leverage their experiences that they are having and the successes that they're having on the stage? How do we best leverage this to get the most out of those experiences to contribute to the future growth?
So do you mean specifically when you're speaking on stage, how do you talk about your client results?
I'm thinking more like I did a talk. I
Mhm.
had an experience on the stage. What do I do with that now? How can I use that to now continue to grow my
Got it.
experience and to, yeah.
Yeah, got it. I mean, at the time that you were speaking or you were about to get booked or afterwards is the best time to use something like that because there's leverage in the fact that it's happening now or it's happening soon. So, like, give you an example. If you were booked to speak in, let's say, Vancouver, right? Let's say the event was in Vancouver. And then you know you're going to speak there, then what I would be doing is I would be reaching out to as many groups as I could around with the same target market in that same area and say, hi, I'm actually speaking for XYZ on this such and such of this date. And seeing as I'm in the city anyway, I was wondering, would you like if I came along and did a presentation for your group as well? I'm in the city anyway. I just thought I'd reach out and see. So that way you're leading with authority. Somebody else has booked you. It's easy. You're already in the city and they're like, well, maybe we should book her as well because she's already doing that. That's one thing I would do in that situation. Then going forward afterwards, I would have something in my email signature that would say that what places that you spoke at or have a speaker page on your website. And I would have a list of those places. Or if you're asking for a place in individually, I'd be like, you're quite similar to such and such group that I spoke at last year. And I was thinking that you probably have the same target market, and maybe I could come along and do a similar presentation for you and maybe share a line of a testimonial that they gave you.
So you recommended that we can, build a presentation or build a talk and continue to deliver that same talk and, for different audiences. And sometimes I wondered, would the same audience see it over and over and over again? And how do I make it different?
Well, first of all, there's a great quote by Dan Kennedy, and he's like one of the greatest marketers of all time. And he says that the mistake that people make is thinking that the business of speaking is the speaking, and the business of speaking is actually booking the stages, right? So if you have a talk, you want to drive the wheels off that talk so that like everybody knows you for this talk, for this message. Then you're becoming known for something. That's how you create authority. Now, if it so happens that you're going back to speak to the same group, that only then would I change it. And depending on the theme of the event or what the needs are, I would just tweak it. But otherwise, I would be wanting to do something very similar. And I would assume that the audience is probably going to be different. Now, these days, I can create a talk very fast. So I can kind of come up with things on the fly. So it's different these days. But I'm really speaking to those people who are not already out there speaking. You want to make it as easy as possible for you. So that's what I would do in that case. But get
So
better at finding stages than you are at speaking. Because if you get
right.
better at finding the stages, you'll inevitably get good at speaking.
Yeah. I mean, the more that you do something, anything, the better we're going to and more comfortable we're going to get at it, right?
Indeed.
So tell me more about you now. So are you still speaking? Are you, what's the growth path for you now?
Yeah, so pre-COVID, I was speaking all over the world and I was, living a freedom-based lifestyle and nomadic, like all over the place. And I was finding stages everywhere I went. And then when COVID happened, I got really focused on virtual stages. So I mostly speak on virtual stages these days, and mostly my own stage is what I'm really loving at the moment. So I do trainings every month for people who want to come learn my speaking model that I teach. And that's my happy place at the moment, is being in a room with some men, mostly female entrepreneurs. I would say 80% women, for like a week to really unpack everything, get to know each other, really connect, and have people walk away truly transformed. That's my stage of choice these days.
I saw something on your website about secret suppers.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I did that during the pandemic. Actually, I created this like a networking style supper virtual gathering. I actually was hosting those in different cities where I did one in Paris, I did one in Bali. And then when the virtual situation came upon us, I started hosting them virtually. And it was really just to do something different and bring people together. I don't do them as much as I did during the pandemic because everything's just different now. But yeah, it was really, really great fun. So it was.
I kind of want somebody to be cooking for me though.
Well, when I was hosting them live, we did have catering.
So we're out of the pandemic now, and some of us are back to traveling, and some actually haven't gotten back to traveling. But what's in the future for you?
Well, what I've loved about how my business has grown is hosting the retreats for my clients. So last year we did Valencia and Morocco. Since the bio and we've initially connected, we did the retreat in Morocco. And this year I can't say because one of my clients might listen to this and we haven't announced it. So I don't want a situation like that. But equally exotic and amazing and authentic cities. That's what I look for to really. Also, I want my clients to get a feeling of what it's like to, be traveling as part of your business. So then when they do come across the pond from Canada or from Ireland or from America, I'm encouraging them to find stages in Europe while you're here. So if you're already coming to this place, then they get a feel for what it's like to be an international speaker. And that can happen pretty fast. So that's where my travel passion lies. And also I'll be going to Iceland for a friend's wedding soon, which I'm really excited about. And I've got my fingers crossed for Japan because the month the pandemic broke out, that was my trip of a lifetime to Japan canceled that I had been planning for a year. So I'm hoping that comes back on the cards really soon as well.
Oh, I hope so for you as well. Iceland is top 3 for me for sure. And I'm hoping to one day get there. Maybe I'll find a stage in Iceland.
Yes, absolutely.
I have a question that I ask all of my guests before we finish up, and I would love to hear your take on it. What's the difference between what we hear kind of out there in the online business world, out there in the business world, and what's real about building a business?
It's messy as hell.
Mm-hmm.
It's messy. And I think that, people who offer perfection and things to be like easy, and it's not easy. It gets easier because we get better, but ultimately it's messy. And you need to be okay with things being messy if you're going to grow a business. And like when today I was helping 2 clients build a talk. And it's the messiest thing to do because you just have to dump everything out. And they're like, oh, how am I going to do this? But I'm like, just relax because this is going to look really, really messy before it gets pretty. And that's what I would say about business ultimately.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think that once we stop thinking we're going to arrive somewhere or there's going to be, something with a pretty bow on it that says, okay, you did it, then we can let go of that expectation and that those kinds of things that make us feel like we're constantly failing and just lean into the process because quite frankly the process is the most fun, isn't it?
It totally is. And also like we don't have markers for success.
There's no business police, right?
No. So it's like, it's whatever it is for you, but whatever it is for you, be very clear about it. Like for your friend booking 100 stages, that would be success for her. For me, getting to my first 6 figures, that was success for me. And then just understand that it's going to change, but it won't be a walk in the park getting there.
No, never. But that's why we surround ourselves with good people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The messiness is what really makes the greatness.
Yeah, it creates the experiences. Can you share with our audience how they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I hang out on Facebook a lot, sometimes Instagram, but Facebook is really my place. And I go live there most days. So if anybody wants to come and hang out and do a live with me, ask me any questions, that'd be awesome. And then I do a monthly training called the Dial in Your Destiny with Speaking Challenge. I found out about 6 months ago that my name means destiny, Stephanie. Can you imagine? I'm 46 now and I just never knew. So I got a bit obsessed with this idea of building a destiny-driven business through speaking. So if anybody wants to understand my frameworks and how it works and creating a high converting talk and getting booked and all that good stuff, then I do that almost every month. So yeah, stay on my radar and I'm sure there'll be an opportunity for us to connect and let me know you heard me on Stephanie's podcast.
Yes. When this comes out, I'm sure that there will be many, many things that Moira is doing because she is active and she is a speaker, and that is her brand. So go and check her out, and we'll put all of the links in the show notes so that everyone can find you. And I want to thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. It's been wonderful to meet you, and I am so excited to see what you build in the future.
Oh, absolutely. You too. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we're coming up on time, so we're going to wrap it up, but I'm so happy we had the opportunity to chat with Moira today to hear more about how her business came to be, her experiences along the way, and what the future of her business entails. And thank you for tuning into this episode of this Real People, Real Business show, where we get the real entrepreneurial stories and journeys that you can relate to. The show notes, resources, and links from this episode are available on my website and social media platforms. And if you've enjoyed today's content, I would love for you to give us a review on whatever platform you're on, as that helps us share these genuine stories with an even bigger audience. Until next time, keep building, keep dreaming, and keep being real.